Welcome to worship at Morton Community United Church of Christ. Today is the last Sunday of Epiphany season, Transfiguration Sunday. Beginning on Wednesday, we will be in the season of Lent, a time of deep spiritual reflection. Today, though, we continue to celebrate the spreading of the light and the joy that it brings. So come, leave behind your schedules and worries. Climb to the mountain and look to Jesus. At the top, we see that he is more than we thought. The light is not a trick, not the play of sunlight on snow. Jesus is our Christ, a light of God illuminating all of our lives. Listen to him. His light transfigures our lives.
This reading is from 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. Now when the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven by a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me as far as Bethel." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. The company of prophets who were in Bethel came out to Elisha and said to him, "Do you know that today the Lord will take your master away from you?" And he said, "Yes, I know. Keep silent." Elijah said to him, "Elisha, stay here, for the Lord has sent me to Jericho." But he said, "As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So they came to Jericho. The company of prophets who were at Jericho drew near to Elisha and said to him, "Do you know that today the Lord will take your master away from you?" And he answered, "Yes, I know. Be silent." Then Elijah said to him, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me to the Jordan." But he said, "As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So the two of them went on. 50 men of the company of prophets also went, and stood at some distance from them, as they both were standing by the Jordan. Then Elijah took his mantle, and rolled it up, and struck the water. The water was parted to the one side and to the other, until the two of them crossed on dry ground. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me what I may do for you, before I am taken from you." Elisha said, "Please let me inherit a double share of your spirit." He responded, "You have asked a hard thing, yet, if you see me as I am being taken from you, it will be granted you. If not, it will not." As they continued walking and talking, a chariot of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them, and Elijah ascended in a whirlwind into heaven. Elisha kept watching and crying out, "Father, Father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." But when he could no longer see him, he grasped his own clothes and tore them in 2 pieces. This is Psalm 50. The Mighty One, God the Lord, speaks and summons the earth from the rising of the sun to its setting. Out of Zion, the perfection of beauty, God shines forth. Our God comes and does not keep silence. Before him is a devouring fire and a mighty tempest all around him. He calls to the heavens above and to the earth, that he may judge his people. "Gather to me, my faithful ones, who made a covenant with me by sacrifice." The heavens declare his righteousness, for God himself is judge. The gospel reading is Mark chapter 9, verses 2 through 9. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what to say, for they were terrified. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud there came a voice, "This is my Son, the Beloved. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them any more, but only Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, he ordered them to tell no one what they had seen, until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us, and happy Valentine's Day. Merlin, hey, Merlin, what do you think? Which one? Which one do you think it is? You don't know either? Oh, we are in trouble. You see, I was hoping to make a cake because it's so cold outside, and turning on the oven helps warm the house. And besides, cake, right? And since it's Valentine's Day, why not? But here's my problem. To make cake, the recipe says I should put baking soda into the cake. And that's important because baking soda reacts with the other ingredients and makes your cake nice and fluffy. And if you don't use baking soda, you wind up with a pancake, which isn't what I'm after. I want a cake. But I have these 2 things. One is baking soda, and one is baking powder. And neither Merlin or I can remember which is which. So, what to do? I have it. Okay, so I know that they'll react with vinegar. If I put the right one in here, it'll react with vinegar. Baking soda in vinegar will cause a reaction. Baking powder in vinegar will not. So let's see. I'll try this one. Okay, let me open up my vinegar. Oh, vinegar certainly has an aroma, doesn't it? And then I've got this mysterious white powder here. Let's see. If this is the right one, I'll just take a little pinch. If this is the right one, there should be some sort. Oh, it's fizzing. Do you hear that? And more. And more. Look at that. I think we have found the baking soda. So that's the one I will put in my cake. That vinegar helped me prove which was the right ingredient for my cake. I'm going to set that in a special spot so I remember. You know, sometimes we need to see proof, don't we? Like say somebody tells you that there's something that's going to happen at 5 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, and you think, well, that's all well and good, but I really want to see it in writing, so you maybe look it up on a pamphlet or on the internet and find out exactly when the event is going to take place, because you want proof. In our gospel lesson today, we heard about a time when Jesus took his disciples, some of his disciples, up a mountain, and they saw some proof. Because Jesus turned even whiter than Gidget here. All around him became a bright white, just so amazingly whiter and brighter. And then there was Moses and the prophet Elijah, and they were all talking, and those disciples who were with him were just amazed, because even though they had spent time with Jesus and seen him doing miracles, and that should have been enough proof, to see Jesus in that state, that transfigured state, and then to hear God, his voice coming from the clouds saying, "This is my son whom I love, listen to him." Wow, that must have been an amazing experience. And they had their proof. What about us? Where's our proof? Where's our proof that Jesus is who Jesus said he is? Well, we can look at the Bible, sure. But sometimes we still have doubts, don't we? And that's okay. You see, God is big enough to handle our doubts. Jesus is big enough to handle our doubts. And maybe we're not hearing a voice from God coming from the clouds telling us that Jesus is his son, or Jesus is God's son. But we can look at the words in the Bible, and we can look at the way that we ourselves are transformed by those words. The way that we, when we become closer to knowing Jesus, become more loving like Jesus. And we ourselves go through a sort of transformation or transfiguration. And that right there, that love, that's all the proof we need. Let's say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Thank you. I'll see you next time.
May the peace, the love, and the clarity of God be with each one of you here today. Sometime during 4th grade, If you want to see what I look like in 4th grade, there's a picture of me on the wall in my office. I had my eyes checked at school, and my parents were advised to get an eye doctor appointment so that I could get glasses. I, of course, was used to seeing things far away, kind of blurry. I was so used to it that I didn't realize that my vision was lacking. For me, the way I viewed the world was normal. My mom did take me to the eye doctor, where I was asked to read a chart of different sized letters. And then the doctor looked into and measured my eyes. You know the drill. Different lenses are used, and you're asked, which looks clearer, this one or that one? Finally, I was given a prescription for my first pair of glasses. Now, way back then in the 60s, there were no glasses in an hour. So I had to wait a few days to get mine. To tell you the truth, that was okay with me. Because when I was little, kids were still called four eyes. I think it's wonderful that most of that stigma has gone away. Why? Glasses are actually fashionable now. When my glasses arrived, I really wasn't expecting much difference in my eyesight. Was I ever wrong? When my parents made me put on those glasses for the first time, I felt like the world I could see far away was a whole new world. I could see things clearly that had been blurry before. And there were some things I saw for the first time. I remember in particular marveling at the sight of individual leaves on trees. Only when I wore corrective lenses did I realize how much I hadn't seen before. As the song puts it, I can see clearly now the rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my way. Gone are the dark clouds that had me blind. It's going to be a bright, 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 sunshiny day. There is a physical way of seeing things more clearly. There's also a spiritual way of seeing more clearly into the essence or soul of a person. One of my favorite books and movies, To Kill a Mockingbird, comes to my mind. Just to refresh your memory, it's a story set in the rural South during the Depression. A small town lawyer named Atticus Finch defends a black man named Tom Robinson, who is accused of raping and beating a white woman. Atticus is a widower raising his son Jem and his daughter Jean Louise, nicknamed Scout, with the help of his African-American housekeeper. Atticus is very close to his children, and they call him by his first name instead of Dad or Father. To Jem, he is just old Atticus because he's older than most fathers and won't even play on the Methodist baseball team. But the day comes when Atticus becomes transfigured, at least for his son. On a hot summer day, a dog with rabies, foaming at the mouth, is spotted in the street outside their home. The sheriff is called and comes with his rifle. When the sheriff sees how far away that dog is, though, he hands his rifle over to Atticus, who calmly takes aim and fires. The dog falls in its tracks, immediately dead. And I remember in the film, Jem just stands there, silent with wide eyes. The sheriff tells him that his father is considered the best shot in the county. Suddenly for Jem, Atticus is transfigured. He is no longer just his old dad. In another scene, Scott and Jem watch the trial of Tom Robinson from the colored section of the courtroom balcony. Scout cannot understand why Atticus has to defend this black man when it causes harm to his reputation. People even call his children nasty names like nigger lover. Still, Scout observes her father's skill as a lawyer, shattering the arguments of the prosecution, proving that Tom Robinson could not have beaten and raped that white girl. Tom is declared guilty. As she continues to watch the courtroom, Atticus, all alone, quietly puts his notes into his briefcase and very slowly walks out. Atticus is so deep in thought that he doesn't notice that all of the African Americans are still seated up in that balcony. When all of them, including Jem, stand out of respect for Atticus, only Scout remains seated. The Reverend looks down at her and says, Miss Jean Louise, stand up. Your father's passing. All at once, Scout is seeing her father Atticus in a whole different light. For her, he has been transfigured. To Kill a Mockingbird is one of my favorites because it compels people to think about racism, courage, and nonviolence. But most of all, it explores the nature of integrity. As one reviewer put it, it presents us with one of the most admirable Christ figures of all time. Well, Jesus' disciples did not see things clearly either, even after they spent about 3 years with him, day in and day out. As my friend and colleague, Reverend Chuck Maney, observes, sometimes they act more like disciples than disciples. Oh, they know Jesus is a spiritual person, a special person. They'd watched him heal the sick, give sight to the blind. They'd heard him teach, preach, tell wonderful stories. Peter, remember, was the first to see and say that Jesus was the Messiah. But he did not understand what kind of Messiah Jesus was. And this becomes clear when Jesus explains what his end will be. And Peter exclaims, God forbid, Lord, this won't happen to you. But Peter, James, and John, the inner circle of those disciples, get a clearer view of Jesus on a mountaintop. We don't know exactly what happened up there, but we do know that those disciples saw real change in Jesus. It seemed to them as if Jesus was glowing, as if God was shining in and through him. And then Moses and Elijah, those great prophets, they show up and they even talk to Jesus. Peter got it, that this was a mountaintop experience. So he says, Lord, it is good that we're here. What an understatement. When Peter suggests that he could build 3 dwellings, sometimes translated shrines, for Moses and Elijah and Jesus, he's putting Jesus up there with those other 2 prophets. Quite an amazing group. Few people at that time would have thought Jesus even equal to those other 2 prophets. And yet Peter is still underestimating Jesus. He still does not fully understand. And then a bright cloud, which is an ancient symbol of God's presence, appears, and they become covered in its shadow. A voice says, This is my son. I love him. I am pleased with him. Listen to him. At this, Peter, James, and John feel such awe that they fall flat on their faces. After Jesus touches them, they look up and they see that Moses and Elijah are gone. Only Jesus is there. The many images and symbols in this story reflect the fact that words have trouble describing experience. The disciples didn't completely understand it themselves. They really didn't until Jesus died and was given new life. Maybe that's why Jesus told them not to tell anyone else until then. Another book I like is titled Promises Broken, Promises Kept by Janet Bedley. I ran across a long word in this book that I didn't believe I'd ever seen before. It seemed to be longer than supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. The author described, I have to get this right, a kaleidoscopically clear day. I'll get it right next time. Those disciples may not have completely understood it all, but their time on the mountain did help them to see a more kaleidoscopically clear Jesus. Now they could see that he was even more than just a healer, a storyteller, a preacher, or a teacher. Now they knew that Jesus was more than just another person, even more than a prophet. The words that jump out to me in this passage are God's words. Listen to him. In other words, don't just stay up on this mountain amazed. Listen to Jesus. Do what he says. And what does Jesus tell them, us, to do? Here's just a few. Let our lives reflect God's ways. Follow Jesus and fish for people. Forgiveness instead of revenge. Love our enemies. Don't judge others. Take up our crosses and follow Jesus. You know, the hard sayings. Hard to hear, even harder to live. Even if those, as much as those disciples of Jesus would have liked to have stayed on that mountain, they can't. They can't if they and we are continue to be disciples. In order to listen to Jesus, we got to get back in the everyday grind of life when there is real work to be done. In the novel, To Kill a Mockingbird, we aren't told how this transfiguration of Atticus for his children affected their lives. We do, however, know what those original disciples did. The Gospel of Matthew describes the scene just after they climbed down the mountain. They didn't wait long for a chance to listen to Jesus. They, with Jesus, came upon a crowd of people who begged him to do something about his troubled son. The father had come to the disciples, but they didn't do a thing to help. It was up to Jesus to heal this boy. When they asked Jesus why they had not been able to heal the boy, Jesus told them that they didn't take God's work seriously enough. He said if they had real faith, they'd be able to move mountains. God knows there's enough work for you and me to do as disciples in our world if we take God seriously. We can work in so many ways. Mission work, social work, supporting others with our resources. We can make a difference when we voice our truths and when our faith informs our voting. Sometimes a greater challenge is loving the neighbor in our own neighborhood. Can we see Jesus more clearly now? Can we see Jesus kaleidoscopically now? If we can, then the opportunities to listen to him and do his ministry are beyond counting. Are you ready? On your mark, no pun intended, get set, go! Amen. Let us hold hands virtually and bow our heads in prayer. our God of all that is silent and all that is spoken. Because our lives are full of details and deadlines, to-do lists, news reports, doctors and vaccine appointments, thank God, we seem to find very few moments in which to savor the beauty of the world or to enter the timeliness of your divine mystery. Yet we know that the time and place exists and is close to us. God of the winter, the snows and storms of winter, and the coronavirus force us to seek shelter and safety and quiet. But in this cold season, if we are quiet and calm, we can discover Jesus, our Christ. Holy God, upon the mountain you showed us our Messiah. May we linger in the peace of Jesus' presence. Then enlighten our paths as we follow him, bringing the light of truth to those around us. And God, hear us as we bring to you silent prayers for those who are lonely, those with health challenges, those who have recently lost a loved one, and for others in our hearts. God, hear our prayers. Amen. May God take you to high places. May God grant you thin places. May God give you moments apart from the ordinary, sacred glimpses of the extraordinary, to shine light into your everyday. God is with us always. Amen.